Overseas to Italy now, where all 60 million residents are on lockdown. In northern Italy, hospitals are overwhelmed, leaving health officials to make difficult choices about who to treat. ICUs are overflowing, and some hospitals are even building tents to test and treat the infected. The Italian government has ordered people to stay home and seek permission for essential travel. There's also a 6 p.m. curfew and enforced space between people in public areas. Normally crowded tourist attractions are nearly deserted, making historic sites look like ghost towns. And in the city of Rome, known for its traffic jams, the streets are practically empty. ABC's correspondent James Longman traveled back to England from Italy this morning and filed this report.
Tonight, the death toll in Italy soaring. Coronavirus taking 168 more lives after nearly 100 died the day before. Fatalities now over 600. Italy's elderly population, the overwhelming victims. The number of total cases topping 10,000. Hospitals in the north finding it hard to cope, making difficult choices about who to treat. ICUs are overflowing. Some hospitals building tents to test and treat the infected. The virus sucking the life out of the rest of the country. 60 million people in effective quarantine. No travel allowed for most unless it's for work or an approved reason. Police enforcing the lockdown. The borders are tightening. Temperature checkpoints for those who cross between Italy and Austria. Italy's schools closed. Sporting events cancelled. People wait in long lines for groceries. Security guards patrol the entrances, letting only a few people in at a time. Authorities urging people to keep about 3 feet away from others. Pat Leiter, an American living in northern Italy, showing us the do not cross line at her grocery store.
There was red tape on the floor marking meter distances from the checkout counter. Then when you went to the deli counter, there was a big red tape line so that you could order from a minute away and call out your order.
Italy has the worst outbreak outside Asia, but China today reported only 19 new cases. Prime Minister Xi visited the epicenter of the virus in Wuhan for the first time, and hospital staff waved to discharged patients, raising hope that the worst there has passed. But Italy remains gripped by the crisis. We got on the last British Airways flight out.
There are people everywhere, and it looks very clear that a lot of people are trying to get out of Italy.
But getting out is becoming increasingly hard to do.
And James Longman joins me now live from London. We're glad you made it, James. I know you're self-quarantined there. We were seeing that video of people being having their temperature checked at the border. What was your experience as you left?
So as you approach the passport gate, someone holds up what looks like an iPad and you're scanned as you go past and you're waved through. Then life is kind of normal in the departure lounge. You make your way onto the plane, and then on the British side, as we disembarked, we were handed forms, and on the form it kind of said, we advise, this self-isolation, by the way, is not mandatory, but the government advises those who've come back from Italy to self-isolate. But there is no temperature check. I was surprised to see upon arrival and upon, check the kind of passport scanning, you would imagine you would see maybe some kind of scanners there, some temperature scanners. Nothing like that on the British side. And there's been a lot of talk here in the United Kingdom about people coming back from high-risk zones and those checks not being in place. So I was surprised to see that. It was certainly an extraordinary experience. That I'd only got to Rome the day before, and the airport was basically empty. The airplane itself from London to Rome had about 15 people on it. And so as soon as the announcement came out, these emergency measures that Giuseppe Conte, the Italian Prime Minister, put forward the other night, there was a mad rush. My phone app, I tried to book my flight, move it up, everything was dying. It was very, very difficult for people to get flights out. And actually that BA flight, the one I got, was the last British Airways flight out of the country. And a lot of the airlines are cancelling their flights out of Italy altogether.
And James, looking at the situation in Italy now, it seems to have gotten so bad so quickly. What are your sources on the ground telling you about how this unfolded?
Look, it's really difficult to know. Anecdotally, when you're there, Italians will say, look, we have our elderly at home. These are members of our family that we cherish and they spend time with us. They're not like other Europeans, perhaps in North America as well, where elderly people tend to get sort of bussed off to a nursing home or an elderly care home. In Italy, they stay in the family unit. But what that means, possibly, is that younger people who may have the virus but don't demonstrate symptoms are more mobile and they carry it, and they carry it to places where there are elderly people who then aren't as able to survive it. So I think this idea of young and old mixing a lot more in this northern region anyway could be something. This could be part of the reason why Italy has been hit so hard. Also, it's important to say that patient zero has still not yet been found, the person that brought the virus into Italy from China. And it could be that they came in much earlier than anyone expected. But it is a sad thing to see, and I was really struck. I got very early this morning in the cab on the way to the airport, and you know what it's like. You always talk to cab drivers everywhere you go in the world. And for the first time in my life, the cab driver started to cry. This is a man in his 40s or 50s, and my Italian is not good, but through Google Translate, I could basically understand him to be really, really worried about his elderly relatives, because consider what it must be like to not be able to visit the people you love and to wonder if your presence will put them further at risk. And that really is a sense throughout Italy now, that the elderly are really on the front lines of this. And he was just crying, and the only word I really understood was "mama," and I could tell that this was something that really upset him. So look, the Italians are doing everything they can to do something about this. I think Giuseppe Conte wants to get out in front of it. There was the sense that perhaps every kind of precaution that was being taken was just a little bit too slow, that the virus was always a couple of steps ahead. So they're really hoping that this works, but certainly the elderly in Italy are really suffering right now.
It's heartbreaking, James. Hopefully these new precautions have a positive impact. Thanks.